I usually get the same table by the window. Third seat from the left, sun hitting the corner of the table just right. I like to watch people pass outside, though mostly I watch my phone and pretend I'm busy. Half of my texts never get sent, half of my thoughts freeze halfway through. She's there most mornings too. Mid-40s, hair that doesn't try too hard, glasses perched on the end of her nose. I don't even know her name yet. Not that it would matter. She leans over her coffee, reads something on her laptop, fingers tapping lightly, the kind of rhythm you don't notice until you do. I notice. This morning, she glanced up as I walked in. Not at me really, just glanced. But our eyes met for a second longer than usual. Enough for my chest to tighten, and I had to look away before I started blinking like an idiot. She smiled, small, almost apologetic, like she knew she'd caught me staring. I order the usual black coffee, no sugar. She orders the same, every day. I noticed because yesterday she hesitated, then said, "Extra hot, please." I remembered. Nobody remembers. I've been coming here for months, not for the coffee, not for the sunlight, not for the half-sent texts that sit in my phone like tiny regrets. It's for her. Or maybe it's for what she makes me feel seen, or at least almost seen, in the quietest way possible. She laughed softly at something on her screen. I wanted to ask what was funny, but I just folded my napkin once, twice, and then left it. She flicked her eyes toward her hands while stirring her coffee, and I wondered if she knew I was noticing. When she walked past my table later, I almost spoke. Almost. My throat tightened. Instead, I let her pass and felt the air settle differently, the leftover warmth of her coat brushing my arm. "You're not like the others," she said. I didn't know if she was joking or serious. My chest stopped for a beat, and I forgot my coffee existed. She leaned slightly closer, as if the words were too fragile to throw across the table, and I pretended I wasn't holding my breath. "Sorry," I said, "because what else can you say?" She shrugged lightly, eyes flicking to her cup, then back to me. "Just noticed." The way she said it didn't ask for reply, but I wanted to answer anyway. I wanted to tell her, "I've noticed you too." But the words got stuck in the hollow of my throat. So I nodded instead. I watched her leave. Outside, her heels clicked against the sidewalk, and for a moment I imagined following her. But I didn't. I stayed finishing my coffee in silence, pretending the sun hadn't moved closer to the table. Then my phone buzzed. A new text, unknown number. "Coffee again tomorrow." I blinked, thumb hovering over the screen. Was it her? Could it be? I put the phone down, the corner of the napkin folded just so, and stared out the window. I didn't move. I found her in the library the next afternoon. Not the university one, the small town branch she always seems to favor, tucked into the corner by the big windows. She looked up when I approached, a faint crease between her brows, like she was measuring whether I was allowed to come closer. "Hey," I said. My voice sounded foreign even to me. She nodded, gesturing to the chair across from her. I hesitated, then sat, letting the quiet between us settle like it belonged there. She was reading a book on modern architecture, one I wouldn't have touched myself, but I noticed the dog-eared page, the faint coffee stain at the corner. Small, human details. "I used to draw buildings," she said suddenly, like the words had been waiting for me to arrive. She didn't look at me when she said it, just traced a line on the table with her finger. "When I was much younger. Before life decided to be practical." I nodded, not sure what to say. "I didn't know. I don't talk about it much," she admitted, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Divorced, kids grown, days like this are quieter than I expected." I realized then that the age gap wasn't just numbers. It was history, experience. Lives fully lived that intersected with mine, only in small, tentative gestures. I imagined holding her hand while she laughed about something trivial, and the image felt impossible. A borrowed warmth I wasn't supposed to feel. She reached over to pour tea into my cup. Hands brushed. I caught the faint scent of her perfume, something like lavender and old books. She paused, a flicker of awareness passing over her face, and I pretended to look out the window. The silence wasn't awkward, it was weighted, like it had been waiting for us. I found myself imagining every scenario, every conversation we weren't having, every word we were afraid to speak. A part of me wanted to run, wanted to retreat to my routine of unsent texts and half-finished thoughts. But another part stayed, anchored by the quiet pull of her presence. She laughed softly at a comment from the librarian. I smiled, but it felt like a betrayal, like laughing at a secret I wasn't allowed to know. She noticed, her eyes met mine, and in that glance there was a question, and maybe an answer too. I'm terrible at making tea, she admitted. I always spill a bit. I wanted to reach across, to steady her hand, to touch her in a way that meant something without saying it. But I didn't. Instead, I lifted my cup slightly, and she mirrored me. A small toast that carried more weight than 1,000 words. When I left, she held the door open a fraction longer than necessary. Her gaze lingered as if she wasn't quite ready to let the moment go. I walked out, chest tight, imagining the warmth of that shared tea carrying through the rest of the day. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I saw her again at the park that evening, sitting on the bench she always chooses, the one under the oak where the shadows fall just right. I approached slowly, as if moving too fast might shadow something fragile. She looked up, smile polite, not quite reaching her eyes. There was a pause, longer than necessary, and I realized she was measuring me, trying to guess what I wanted before I even said it. I didn't expect to see you here, she said. I shrugged, hands in pockets. I come here sometimes, simple. Safe. I didn't add that I'd come hoping to see her. We walked together slowly, though neither of us really moved forward. Her hand brushed mine once. I almost held it, but I let it fall. Almost. It felt like the air itself was holding us back. I wanted to ask her if she was lonely. I wanted to tell her I noticed the way she twisted her ring when she was thinking, or the faint crease in her brow when she read something sad. But the words wouldn't come. They never did when I needed them most. She glanced at a group of joggers and then back at me, hesitated, something passed in her eyes, a flicker of doubt or fear. You're different, she said, voice lower this time, almost a whisper. But I don't know what that means. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to say, it means I can't stop noticing you. But my voice didn't find the words, so I nodded. Not in agreement, not in understanding, just nod. A kid ran past, chasing a ball, shouting my name, my neighbor, someone from my usual life, and the spell broke. She turned slightly away, and I realized how fragile the bubble between us was. One interruption, one stray glance, and everything became ordinary again. We sat on the bench, shoulder to shoulder, and the silence stretched. I caught myself imagining leaning closer, the faintest touch, her breath brushing my cheek. And for a moment, I thought she might too. Her hand shifted slightly, almost toward mine, then retreated. The hesitation was unbearable and electric. My own hand hovered over hers, unsure whether to retreat or move forward. Our gazes met, lingered, and in that instant, the rest of the world disappeared. A near kiss, half confession, something unspoken, waiting to be decided. Then a jogger's whistle, a dog barking, the distant hum of traffic. The moment fractured. She exhaled softly, adjusting her scarf, and the closeness dissolved. I stayed a little longer, watching her walk away, the weight of what almost happened pressing on my chest. Almost, that word repeated in my head. Almost, I ran into her at the small farmer's market, the one by the river where the air smells faintly of bread and rain. She was examining apples, turning each one in her hand, like she could tell their story by the curve of the skin. Hey, I said, careful not to startle her. She smiled, a little tight. Hey. We walked between the stalls, shoulders brushing once in a fleeting, electric way. I kept stealing glances at her, memorizing the way her scarf twisted around her neck, the tilt of her head when she smiled at a vendor. I started, words tangled. I didn't know you liked this sort of thing. She shrugged, eyes scanning the fruit. Not really. Just quiet. That word felt heavy, like it belonged to both of us. I noticed the way her fingers lingered on the basket handle, hesitant. I wanted to reach out, to steady her hand, to do something small that meant more than words. Then a woman approached, chatting loudly, a friend I didn't recognize. She leaned in, laughing too close, and I felt it, a pang of jealousy I didn't know I had. Not loud, not dramatic, just sharp and quiet, like a sudden chill. I watched her smile, the way her attention shifted, and I realized I wanted that space back. I wanted her to notice me the way she used to, and maybe I wanted more. I'm glad you're here, I said, voice lower, almost swallowed by the market noise. I mean, glad I ran into you. She glanced at me, then down at her basket. You're different," she said softly, echoing her own words from before. And she stopped, eyes flicking away, caught on something distant. Something unspoken hung in the air, raw and trembling. I wanted to push to hear it, to close the space between us. Instead, I reached for a bag of bread, fumbling with the paper. My hand brushed hers for a second too long, and I thought her pulse quicken. My chest tightened. "I sometimes wonder if I'm—" I broke off, words I couldn't say. Fear, guilt, longing, all tangled into one unfinished thought. She looked up, directly at me this time, eyes wide, almost vulnerable. "Do you ever feel like it's too much?" The question hung between us, unspoken layers beneath it. Too much attention, too much desire, too much risk. I didn't answer. My mouth opened, closed. Nothing came. We stood there, surrounded by quiet market chatter, apples, bread, the distant river hum, and I realized she was waiting for me to finish. To say something I wasn't ready to say. I wanted to say everything. But instead I just nodded, letting the silence carry us, letting the pause stretch like a wire between us. Her gaze lingered. My hand itched to reach for hers again, to steady it, to do something irreversible. She didn't show up the next morning at the cafe. Nor the one after that. My routine became a quiet game of waiting and not waiting. Staring at the corner table as if my presence alone could summon her. I called once, left a message that went unsent in my mind a dozen times. "Hey, everything okay?" My thumb hovered over the call button, then withdrew. Small, mundane gestures suddenly carried weight. When I finally saw her again, it was at the bus stop, a week later. She looked different. Guarded. The easy tilt of her head was gone, replaced by a subtle stiffness. She avoided my eyes. I said, voice too loud in the empty morning. "Hi," she replied. Flat, short. Something had shifted. I noticed the faint ring on her hand, simple, gold, unremarkable, but it made my chest tighten. Not like jealousy exactly. More like a reminder that life keeps moving, even when you're stuck on a single frame. We walked together briefly, silence stretching between us. I wanted to ask, "Where have you been? What happened?" But I didn't. I wanted to say, "I missed you," but the words felt impossible. She mentioned a doctor's appointment, a cousin visiting, errands piling up. Everything sounded ordinary, yet somehow defensive. I realized then that maybe there was more, something she hadn't said, a shadow lurking behind the quiet smiles we'd shared. Later, I sat alone at the cafe. The seat across from me stayed empty, my coffee cooled faster than usual. I imagined her there, folding her napkin just so, stirring her tea, glancing at her laptop. I imagined the words she might have spoken, the excuses she might have made, the small truths she'd kept to herself. And I realized I didn't feel heartbroken. Not exactly. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I typed her name in my phone, deleted, typed again, deleted. The message remained unsent, hovering like a fragment of hope. When the door opened later, I looked up instinctively. Not her. Not the face I wanted to see. Only the familiar clatter of cups, the occasional cough, the faint hum of conversation. I folded the napkin in half, then in half again. Checked the time. Thought about calling her, leaving a note somewhere, chasing her down. I didn't. I just sat, letting the emptiness of her absence settle in my chest, the way a window left ajar lets the cold seep quietly in. The seat across from me remained empty. I found her in the small courtyard behind the apartment building. Late afternoon. Sun was slanting through the leaves, painting the bricks in streaks of gold. She was crouched by the flower bed, hands in the soil, muttering to herself about how stubborn the weeds were. I lingered by the gate, unsure if I should step forward or turn back. Every instinct told me to hesitate. But another told me to close the distance while it was still quiet enough to matter. She looked up when I finally crossed the small path. "You came," she said, as if surprised but not entirely displeased. "I did," I said. Pause. "I wasn't sure you'd want me here." She shrugged, small smile. "I don't know, maybe not." We stood there, the hum of the city softened behind the walls, a few birds calling in the distance. My hands itched to reach for hers, to steady her as she wiped soil off her fingers. She noticed, I think, because her gaze flicked toward my hands and lingered. "I didn't mean to." I started, but stopped. The words felt inadequate. How do you explain months of stolen glances, half-finished thoughts, and quiet longing? She leaned back slightly on her heels. I wasn't avoiding you, she said slowly. Just figuring out how much I could let myself feel without breaking something else. The confession was soft, almost lost in the breeze. My chest ached. I wanted to tell her everything I felt, how noticing her made ordinary things brighter, how her small habits had invaded my routine, how her absence had been unbearable. But instead I let the silence carry my answer. I knelt beside her as if proximity could speak for me. She didn't move away. Her eyes softened, hesitant, careful, and I realized this moment was fragile, a thin thread we might pull too hard. I don't know if I can stop noticing you, I said finally. Voice low, quiet, but carrying everything. She tilted her head, lips pressing together. You don't have to, no grand gesture, no dramatic turn. Just that, and the way her hand brushed mine as she pushed herself up. The contact was brief, but it said more than words ever could. I exhaled, letting the tension slide down my spine, a mixture of relief and fear. The risk was still there, everything about our lives, our ages, our histories, but for a moment, none of it mattered. We just stood. I looked at her. She looked at me. Then she smiled, small, imperfect, entirely real. Okay, she said. I mirrored the smile, and for the first time in months, it felt like we were allowed to exist in the same space without pretense or hesitation. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the courtyard, and still, neither of us moved. We didn't need to. Weeks passed. Months, maybe. I stopped checking the corner table at the cafe every morning, but I kept my routine anyway. Black coffee, 80:47 a.m. The first sip tasting a little sweeter now that I wasn't waiting for someone who might not appear. She showed up one morning, not exactly on schedule, a little flustered, holding a thermos of tea. Thought I'd bring something hot, she said, like it was ordinary, though nothing about it was. We sat together on the bench by the park, the same oak, same shadows, same awkward comfort. Her hand brushed mine while passing the thermos. I didn't flinch, I didn't hesitate. The small contact felt like claiming a corner of the world where we both belonged. Sometimes we spoke. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes I watched her fold a napkin just so, or stir her tea, or glance at the sky, and I thought, I know you, and that's enough. The age gap, the past lives, the routines we had to adjust, they didn't vanish. They weren't obstacles anymore. They were just part of the quiet gravity that kept us near each other. She laughed at a joke I didn't quite make, and I realized I had stopped worrying about saying the wrong thing. Silence was safe now, shared, even cherished. I noticed everything again. Her twitch when concentrating, the faint crease near her eyes when she smiled. I noticed because I was allowed to, without guilt or longing twisting the moment. One evening, the cafe closed early. We walked home. The sun low, the city quiet, and paused at the corner where it had all begun. Where I first noticed her leaning over her laptop, where a glance had changed months of ordinary mornings. You ever think about how small things stick? I asked. She glanced at me, eyebrows lifted. All the time, she said. Even the unsent texts. I smiled, she smiled back. A quiet acknowledgement. A shared memory that no one else would understand. We didn't need to speak more than that. Everything that mattered had already been said in gestures, pauses, and the soft weight of presence. I brewed my coffee the next morning, black as always. She brought her tea. We sat together, the bench warmed by sunlight and the day just beginning. Routine made extraordinary by quiet constancy. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and maybe that was all we ever needed.